Okay, this is a video lecture as part of my introduction to the class, and it's entitled How Do You Know? Or How Do You Know What You Know? And so far, you've watched two videos. The first one was one of my favorite educational speakers, Ken Robinson, Changing Educational Paradigms. And I hope you got a lot out of that. I'm sure you loved it because it really does a good job on public schools and their deficiencies and their problems. And we could talk endlessly about it. I normally take an entire class period to talk about this 10-minute video. But I also want to focus on one thing, one small element, and that is how we talked about in school, how you are taught that there's one answer, only one answer, and it's at the back of the book, and you can't look and don't cheat. And that's the way we're trained, right? That, school's very mechanized, and so we can't sit here and have big discussions about possibilities or creativity. We just have to move on. And that's fine, except it does have some drawbacks. And you'll hear me talk about this the entire year. I'll refer back to this video that you watched, so keep that in mind. There's only one answer, and it's at the back of the book, and the problems associated with that. The other video you watched kind of shows that, the power of education and educators and authority figures. And so we have this third grade teacher, Jane Elliott, who has an exercise with her class that blue-eyed kids are better or smarter than brown-eyed kids, and they come to believe it as a fact, and they behave and respond to that. And so you can see how unbelievably dramatic all that is. There's actual physical violence in the classroom and so on over this alleged fact. So when you learn that there's only one answer, and it's at the back of the book in education, then when the teacher says blue-eyed is better than brown-eyed, you kind of have no choice to believe it. And that's what I'm exploring in this little lecture here. And so about this time in class, what we would be doing is talking about Earth. And I choose Earth as kind of the vehicle for this discussion because we all live on it. We all think we have a very good understanding of it. It seems very factual, very empirical to us. There's no questions with Earth. And what I would like to do is kind of take you down a path that makes you do a little bit of that at least. And so this may not be the world you know it is. There may be other things about it that you should start thinking about, and that's the discussion. And so in class, I ask a question: do you know the Earth is a sphere? Or do you think or believe the Earth is a sphere? And normally, obviously, we think we know the Earth is a sphere. It's a fact. And I love that response because my next question then is, if you know it, can you prove it? And I've put this to every student pretty much my entire career, that you cannot prove to me the Earth is a sphere. I'm not saying it's not, I'm saying you can't prove it. And this tends to be a very lively, very often hostile discussion because we're so wrapped up in what we believe to be facts and truth, not realizing that how did we come to know those things to be true? Real quick, before you go to your parents and tell them that Mr. Pickett is telling you the Earth is flat, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can't prove it's a sphere, and there's a difference. Okay? So I just want to talk about a few things with this. If you want to bring this up when we have our Zoom meeting, you certainly can. It'd be fun. Or we can also just move on. Normally in class, almost always the first bit of evidence that students present is that the Earth, there's tons of pictures from space of Earth, and it's clearly a sphere. And my first response is, well, actually, all the pictures are flat, actually proving that it's flat. As you look here at this little lecture, right, that is a flat Earth. It's a circle, but you can't prove it's a sphere from that. My second thing is, then how do you explain this picture of Earth from space, right? And most students are like, well, that's not a real picture. And my question is, how do you know it's not a real picture? How do you know this is a real picture and the other pictures you see aren't? How do you know? You've never been in space, right? And so you don't really know, and you rely on other things. And that's kind of where I'm getting at, right? Another thing students talk about is like day and night. It's day in one part of the Earth and night on the other. Well, that's because if you look at this picture, the sun and moon go in an orbit above the surface of the flat Earth, making daylight there, which looks like Africa, and darkness in North America, and so on. Not to mention the fact, how do you even know what continents really look like? You don't. Right? What you would point to is a map or something like that. Well, who's to say that's what it looks like? Okay? Here's another explanation of the sun and the moon, not to mention seasons. hot, dry, cold, etc., and the edges of the earth, and so on. If you were taught this and shown this in books your whole life, starting in kindergarten, that's what you would believe, right? And that's my point. So you have to be careful with the information we are fed. We have to challenge and think for ourselves is really the ultimate thing. I often then ask, have you ever heard of anybody falling off the edge of the earth? And everybody, of course, says no. And my response is, well, that's because they've fallen off and you've never heard from them again, as this picture proves, right? And so we never hear about anybody falling off the edge because they're gone. So there you go. Super lively discussion. Sorry we can't do it. And if you want to do it in Zoom a little bit, we can. If you want to give it a go, feel free. No one's ever won, but give it a shot. All right, so now into more practical items. How does the world look? And if you're in my classroom or you're in any classroom, you see the maps around the walls and so on, and you're in your book, and it looks a certain way. Well, cannot the Earth look like this? Is this not a representation of the planet, right? It looks foreign to you probably because it's an upside down map. And we never look at maps this way. We have Australia in the center, up in the what we would call the northern, but in this case, the southern part of the map. Everything's like upside down. And why can't Earth look like this as well? And in fact, of course, it does. In particular, people in Australia love this map because, like I said, it puts them top center. So they like it. If you want a quick example, where do we come up with Middle East as a region? Or the Far East, or any directional stuff? If the Earth is a sphere, as you claim, then there can't be a Middle East. It's a sphere, right? So we're calling it the Middle East in reference to something else, and in general, that's Europe. And so we're European-based as well. So why can't a map look like that? Okay, so just something interesting. Here's a good question. What public jobs do we value most? And a public job means a job paid for with like taxpayer funds. So the government collects taxes and then pays for things. And when I throw this out to classes, it's normally like the governor or attorneys or doctors or something like that. So take a look at this map. These are the highest paid public employees by state in America. And as you'll notice, pretty much every highest paid person is a coach, mostly a football coach. Not really anything to do with that, but did you know that? Is this something you were aware of and makes sense to you? If an alien were to come down into America and ask this question, what would they think of football coaches? They would say, oh my God, these people must be really instrumental in creating the society you want or something like that, right? And so I'm not making any judgment. Why not? Football coaches, they certainly bring in a lot of money into universities and so on. And that's what they are, by the way. Like the UCLA football coach is the highest paid public employee in California. And he brings a lot of money into the university, which then uses it for research and school and so on. So maybe it's not a big deal. My question is, did you know that, right? Or did you not know that? All right, I'm just going to go through a lot of slides kind of quickly here. Here's something, just call it a brain buster. There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. Let that sit for a minute. Right? And we think of the beaches and the hills and the deserts with all that sand. It's just massive and just every grain. But do we grasp that there are more stars than that? Even way more than that, for that matter. How much have we Google mapped? Anytime I go looking at anywhere I want to go, it's Google mapped and I can get a street view and all that. But really, it's just North America and Europe. For a majority of the world, it's not mapped, right? Little bits here and there, but that's basically it. And so here in America, I mean, look at America, it's completely solid. We have this perception that, oh, Google has mapped everything. Well, it's mapped everything we know. Where do people live? You know, the 405, 101 seems pretty crowded a lot of days, and the valley with all the people and stuff seems pretty populated. But here's an interesting little fact. There are more people living inside of that circle than outside of it. Crazy, right? So there's more people. It's at India, China, Southeast Asia, and so on. More people live in that area than outside of that area. And so actually the 405 doesn't seem so crowded, does it? And so just something to look at. Another just interesting fact, and this one really kind of gets students. If the Earth was the size of a pool ball, meaning that you took Earth and shrank it to the size of a pool ball, it would actually be smoother than a pool ball. Make sense? right? So if you took a pool ball and shrunk it, there would not be these big ridges for mountains and all that other stuff. And so it would actually be smoother than a pool ball. Conversely, if you took a pool ball and increased it to the size of the Earth, there would be mountains bigger than any mountains on Earth. So what's going on there? Well, it's on our perspective, right? We think Mount Everest is this enormous mountain, but it's because of the scale. If we go back to that picture of Earth from space, or any picture from Earth from space, you can see it's smooth. You can't see the peaks of our biggest mountains. But we don't think about that very often. Is the world crowded? Seems like it, right? With global warming and all that other stuff. Here are some interesting little visuals. A little hard to understand, I get that, but we have about 7 billion people on Earth. If we crammed everybody into the density of Paris, this is how much area it would take up, okay? Meaning, with how many people live per square mile in Paris, if you took 7 billion people into that, Paris would expand to this size. If we went to, this is a little more understandable, New York City, this is how many people. So you could take 7 billion people, you could put them all in the state of Texas, and Texas would be with the density of New York. Is that crowded? I don't know. Maybe that is crowded. But it's a different way of looking at it, and that's what I'm trying to get you to do, to look at things differently. Quick story, I had a student once concerned about the environment, and he told me about this garbage patch that's out in the Pacific Ocean, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, or whatever it's called. And he came into me, and he was really upset, and he said, "Mr. Pickett, this thing is the size of Texas." And my response was, "Oh my God, like Texas is huge, and there's that much trash the size of Texas in the Pacific." And I was even taken by it, and then he and I looked at a map, and it's like, oh, the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean is like nothing. And so I don't know what to think of that, but I didn't look at it that way. And so that's what I'm trying to get you to do. Ooh, who values new mothers most? Do we value mothers here in America? Sometimes we say yes, because, we have Mother's Day, and that's great, and we like moms. But let's take a look at this graphic. Here are the countries that pay mothers, give them paid maternal leave when they have a child. And you'll see that pretty much every country in the world grants some level of at least 14 weeks, roughly 3 months, of paid maternal leave. Okay, there's just a few countries that don't. One is the United States, along with Suriname, Liberia, Papua New Guinea, Palau, Nauru, Western Samoa, and Tonga, and that's it. Does that mean we don't like moms? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Does it mean we don't value them? Not necessarily, but it seems a bit strange that if we did, why would we not help out with that, right? This is a newborn child into our country, who's citizen. It seems like maybe we would give a little more time to that, right? Third brain buster, a speck of dust is halfway in size between an atom and the Earth. So if you imagine a speck of dust, if you were to put it on a scale, an atom would be at the far left, the Earth would be at the far right, and the dust would be right in the middle in terms of its size. So we think of a piece of dust as pretty small, but geez, an atom is just kind of unimaginable. Another question, how do you measure something, right? Mr. Pickett, this is a dumb question. We measure it in feet and miles and gallons and so on. Well, here are all the countries that do not use the metric system. And it's us, the United States, looks like Liberia, and I think that's Burma over there, and that's it. The entire planet uses the metric system. What does that mean? Again, doesn't really matter. Do you know that, right? So we assume that miles and feet and gallons are the proper way to do things because that's what we're taught. Just like the Ken Robinson video, just like the blue-eyed, brown-eyed, we assume that these things that we know are truth. And that's fine, except when it isn't. And that's the danger that I want to talk about. All right. Here's a little optical illusion for you, though, to make a point. We have to believe these things on a day-to-day basis because we're exposed to so much stimuli. We see so many things, we hear so many things. If you were to question everything, right? If in a first grade classroom the teacher said 2 + 2 is 4, and the kids were like, "Prove it, how do you know?" and did all that, we would never get anywhere. Or just about anything in our lives of what we see and do, our brain makes super quick connections to fill in gaps. Because if it doesn't do that, how would we get through the day? It's also, by the way, the reason why we dream. You go to bed and your mind kind of shuts off to all the stimuli, and now it needs, several hours to kind of process and make sense of things and so on. So here's a visual of that. Take a look at this. And you'll see it seems to be some kind of open box, like a jewelry box, and the top is gray and the bottom is white. Well, actually what's happening is your brain is interpreting that way. That's actually not true. The top gray, or what appears to be gray, is actually the same color as the white on the bottom. And you're thinking I'm nuts, but watch this. Oh, I didn't have it. Oh, sorry. If you put your hand across that middle part, if you put 2 fingers or whatever across the seam right there where the hinge is, and then look at it, you'll see very clearly that the gray and the white are actually both the same color of gray. And this has been an internet thing recently, right, with the blue dress or gold dress and all that stuff. Something's going on optically and we're making shortcuts. And so same here, right? So it's just easier to believe it. So it's easier to believe it's gray with white than it is to believe that, no, it's this kind of way it's situated that makes us believe that. Okay? All of these are squares. There is no, or there are no slanted lines on this illusion. And if you want to take a look at it for a while, you'll notice that when you look at it quickly, it looks like they're like slanted back and forth. Squares are bigger and smaller than the other, but actually not. They're all exactly the same size. But our brain is trying to help us out, but it's actually fooling us. So our visual senses on a simplistic kind of level can even be fooled, and what we even see may not be the truth. Okay, last one, and this is about the end. How many dots on this can you see at once? Right? Normally the answer is like 3, maybe 4, possibly 5, depending on how hard you try. I think this is probably the most telling and most important optical illusion. You can see 3 or 4 of these dots when you focus your attention on them. And if you don't focus your attention, they disappear. Interesting. So where you place your focus, meaning what you listen to, what you look at, what you read, that's what you see. And if you don't focus your attention and your attention is elsewhere, you don't see it. And I believe this is an issue for a lot of our issues in our country and in the world, right? The differences we have, all the hostilities we had, very serious race protests and so on, and just being objective, people didn't see eye to eye. Some people were saying, oh, there's all this brutality by the police, as an example, and other people saying, I don't know what you're talking about. There isn't that, you're liars. Well, are they liars, or are they just focused on one thing? And the other people who saw police as very helpful and beneficial, are they just racist, or do they just not have those interactions with police because they see or focus on something else? And maybe it's because of a luxury, or maybe it's who knows what. There's endless reasons. And so I really like this optical illusion because it very quickly points that out, right? Optically, you see where you put your focus, and if your focus isn't there, you don't see it. All right, that's the end of this. The next video I hope you enjoyed too. Thanks a lot.